Sometimes you think you know exactly how someone will react, and then they completely blindside you. I'm Sky. I'm 38, and I learned the hard way that blood really is thicker than water, even when you think you've earned your place in the family. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing about my experiences, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. So here's what happened. I was married to Carter for 6 years, and look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The man was exhausting. He had this way of making everything about work, about money, about providing. Carter was one of those guys who thought throwing cash at problems solved them, always working these insane hours, coming home stressed and distant, then acting like I should be grateful because he paid for our house and cars. Between us, I felt more like a business expense than a wife half the time. His mother, Elizabeth, though. She got it. From day one, she treated me like the daughter she never had. We'd go shopping together, have these long lunch dates where we'd just talk for hours. She'd text me daily, asking how I was doing, what I was up to. Carter barely called his own mother, but there I was, filling that void. She used to say I was the best thing that ever happened to their family, that I brought life and warmth to their stuffy dynamics. Here's the thing. When you're married to someone who's emotionally unavailable, you start looking elsewhere for connection. I don't mean I went out hunting for an affair, but when Nate started training me at the gym, he actually listened when I talked. He asked about my day-remembered little details Carter never bothered with. Nate was attentive in ways Carter had forgotten how to be. The affair lasted 8 months. 8 months of feeling alive again, of having someone who actually wanted to spend time with me instead of just providing for me. Carter was so wrapped up in his work that he didn't even notice I was different. Happier. That should tell you everything about our marriage right there. But Carter, being the obsessive control freak he is, had to go digging through my phone. It found the texts, the hotel receipts, everything. Instead of asking what went wrong in our marriage, instead of wondering why his wife felt so alone, she turned to someone else he just went nuclear. Started screaming about betrayal and lies like he was this perfect husband who never did anything wrong. When I tried to explain that I'd been lonely, that I needed more than just a paycheck with legs, he wouldn't hear it. Carter's always been dramatic when he doesn't get his way. So he filed for divorce immediately, wouldn't even consider counseling or working things out. Just straight to the lawyers, like our 6 years together meant nothing. That's when I knew I needed Elizabeth's support. She'd always been in my corner, always understood me better than her own son did. I called her the day after Carter found out, expecting her to be there for me, like she always was. Elizabeth, I need to talk to you about something serious, I said when she picked up. Of course, honey. What's going on? Carter found out about Nate. Silence, then. What about Nate? We've been seeing each other for a while now. More silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. Colder. What did you do to push Carter away? I felt like she'd slapped me. What do you mean? What did I do, Elizabeth? I was miserable. Carter's never home. He's always working. So you cheated on my son. It's not that simple. You know how he is, how obsessed he gets with work. I was drowning, Elizabeth. I needed someone who actually cared about me. Yeah, he works to take care of you, Sky, to give you the life you want. Money isn't everything, I snapped. I needed a husband, not a bank account. And you thought sleeping with another man was the solution? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was Elizabeth, the woman who'd been like a mother to me, who understood me better than anyone. I thought you'd get it. I thought you'd understand that sometimes people make mistakes when they're hurting. Mistakes? Her voice got sharper. Sky, you had an affair for 8 months. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. Multiple choices. Fine choices then, but Carter drove me to it with his neglect. You've seen how he is. What I've seen is a man who works himself to death to make you happy, and apparently it still wasn't enough. That conversation changed everything between us. Elizabeth, the woman who used to text me every day, who called me her daughter, suddenly became distant. When Carter filed for divorce, she didn't call to comfort me or offer support. Instead, she started having these long phone conversations with him, checking on him, making sure he was okay. The betrayal cut deeper than Carter's anger ever could. I'd lost my husband, sure, but I'd expected that. Losing Elizabeth felt like losing my real family. She'd been more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was, and now she was treating me like a stranger. You're taking his side, I told her during another phone call. I'm not taking sides, Sky. I'm supporting my son through his divorce. Same thing. You're choosing him over me. He's my child. You broke his heart. And what about my heart? What about how lonely I was, how neglected I felt? That's between you and Carter, but cheating wasn't the answer. The worst part was watching her rally around Carter like he was the victim here. She started bringing him meals, doing his laundry, treating him like he was fragile. Meanwhile, I was the one whose world was falling apart, and she couldn't spare me a single supportive word. Then came the phone call that destroyed everything. My lawyer called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and his voice was tense. Sky, we have a problem. Carter's attorney just submitted additional evidence for the divorce proceedings. What kind of evidence? A character reference from your mother-in-law? My stomach dropped. What does that mean? She wrote a 5-page letter to the court about your marriage, your behavior, Carter's character as a husband. I'm reading it now, and Sky, it's not good for you. She describes Carter as a devoted, hardworking husband who did everything he could to make you happy. She talks about your spending habits, your complaints about his work schedule, your general dissatisfaction with the marriage. I couldn't breathe. She's helping his lawyer. It appears so. She reached out to them, directly offered to provide testimony about your marriage dynamics. Elizabeth had gone behind my back to help destroy me in court. The woman who'd claimed to love me like a daughter was actively working to make sure I got as little as possible in the divorce. She was painting me as some ungrateful gold digger who couldn't appreciate her hardworking husband. I called her immediately. Did you contact Carter's lawyer? Sky, did you write a letter to the court about our marriage? What? Someone needed to tell the truth about what kind of husband Carter was. The truth is that he ignored me for years. The truth is that he worked 60-hour weeks to give you everything you wanted, and you thanked him by sleeping with another man. You have no idea what our marriage was really like. I have a pretty good idea. I watched Carter bend over backward trying to make you happy, and nothing was ever enough. That's not true. Isn't it? The new car wasn't enough, the bigger house wasn't enough, the vacations weren't enough. He couldn't work less because you wanted the lifestyle, but then you complained he worked too much. I never asked for any of that stuff. You enjoyed it, though. You enjoyed spending his money while complaining about how he earned it. I hung up on her. My own mother-in-law, the woman who'd been my closest confidant for 6 years, had stabbed me in the back. She'd taken everything I'd ever confided in her about my marriage and twisted it to make me look terrible. The divorce mediation was a nightmare. Carter's lawyer came armed with Elizabeth's letter bank records, showing my spending patterns and a timeline of my affair that made me look calculated and manipulative. My lawyer tried to argue emotional neglect, but Elizabeth's testimony painted a picture of a woman who was never satisfied, never grateful, always wanting more. I got the house sale split 60-40 in Carter's favor, half of his retirement account, and 18 months of spousal support. At $1,500 a month, it could have been worse, but it wasn't nearly what I'd hoped for. I'd expected to walk away with enough to start over comfortably. Instead, I was looking at moving back in with my parents. The real kick in the teeth came when I found out Carter had cut off Elizabeth's monthly support. For 12 years, he'd been sending her $2,500 every month to help with her mortgage. The day after she submitted that letter to his lawyer, he canceled the automatic transfer and blocked her number. Serves her right, I told Nate when I heard about it. She chose to betray me, now she can deal with the consequences. But Nate wasn't really listening anymore. Once he realized I wasn't going to be the financially comfortable divorcee he thought I'd be, his interest started waning. Our conversations became shorter, our dates less frequent. He started canceling plans, claiming work was crazy or he wasn't feeling well. The final blow came 3 weeks after my divorce was finalized. Nate texted me, didn't even have the decency to call, saying he thought we should take a break and see other people. He was already seeing someone else, obviously. Someone with money, someone who could afford his training sessions and expensive dinners without worrying about spousal support running out. So there I was, divorced, dumped, and living with my parents at 38, Meanwhile, Carter was thriving. He'd bought himself a condo downtown, joined some sailing club, and according to mutual friends, seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. Elizabeth was struggling. Without Carter's monthly help, she couldn't make her mortgage payments. The bank started foreclosure proceedings within 3 months. I heard through the grapevine that she'd tried calling Carter, begging him to reconsider, but he wouldn't even take her calls. "He's really going to let his own mother lose her house?" I asked Caroline, Carter's aunt, when she called to see how I was doing. "Elizabeth made her choice when she wrote that letter," Carolyn said. "Carter's just living with the consequences of her decision." "But she's family." "So were you, supposedly. Didn't stop her from throwing you under the bus when it mattered." The irony wasn't lost on me. Elizabeth had chosen Carter over me, and now Carter was choosing himself over Elizabeth. She'd burned her bridge with me to support him, and he'd cut her off anyway. Elizabeth lost the house 6 months later, had to move in with Jillian Carter's sister and her husband Everett. From what I heard, it was causing major problems in their marriage. Everett wasn't thrilled about his mother-in-law moving into their guest room indefinitely, especially when she spent most of her time complaining about how ungrateful Carter was. I should have felt sorry for her, but I didn't. Elizabeth had made her bed when she decided to betray me. She'd chosen to believe Carter's version of our marriage over mine, chosen to paint me as some villain who couldn't appreciate her precious son. Now she was discovering that her precious son wasn't quite the devoted family man she'd thought he was. Jillian called me 8 months after the divorce, sounding desperate. "Sky, I need you to talk to Carter." "Why would I do that?" "Mom is destroying my marriage. Everett's threatening to leave if she doesn't move out, but she has nowhere to go. That sounds like a Carter problem, not a Sky problem." "She's sorry about the letter. She knows she was wrong." "No, she's not sorry. She's sorry she's homeless." "Can't you find it in your heart to forgive her? She's family." Was family, past tense. "This is ridiculous. You're both being stubborn." I'm being realistic. Elizabeth chose Carter over me when I needed her most. Then Carter chose himself over Elizabeth when she needed him most. That's the family dynamic you're all so proud of." "She made a mistake." "She made a choice." "Multiple choices? Just like I did with Nate." "So you're just going to let her suffer?" "I'm going to let her live with the consequences of her actions, just like she let me live with mine." The truth is, seeing Elizabeth struggle should have made me feel vindicated, but it just made me feel empty. I'd lost everything. My marriage, my affair partner, my mother-in-law, my comfortable life. Carter had lost his wife and his relationship with his mother, but he seemed genuinely happier without us. He'd joined that sailing club, was taking weekend trips, had even started dating, according to Caroline. Me. I was working part-time at a retail job, living in my childhood bedroom and spending my evenings scrolling through social media, looking at everyone else's seemingly perfect lives. Nate had gotten engaged to some woman with family money. I saw the announcement on Instagram. Carter looked tan and relaxed in the sailing club photos Caroline showed me. Even Elizabeth, miserable as she was on Jillian's couch, had people who cared about her situation. I had nobody. The friends Carter and I had shared chose sides, and they didn't choose mine. My parents loved me, but made it clear they thought I'd brought this all on myself. My siblings were polite, but distant, tired of hearing me complain about how unfairly I'd been treated. Maybe it's time to take some responsibility," my sister said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. Responsibility for what? For being lonely in my marriage, for finding someone who actually cared about me, for cheating, for lying, for expecting everyone to support you after you blew up your life. I didn't blow up my life. Carter did when he refused to forgive one mistake. 8 months isn't one mistake, Sky. That's a relationship. Sick, fine, whatever. I had a relationship with someone who treated me better than my husband did, and now you're alone. Now I'm free from people who never really loved me anyway. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Carter had loved me in his way. Elizabeth had loved me too, until I proved I couldn't be trusted. I'd thrown away real relationships for something that turned out to be meaningless the moment it became inconvenient. The worst part was the silence. No more daily texts from Elizabeth asking how I was doing. No more lunch dates or shopping trips. No more feeling like I had a real family who cared about me. Carter and I might have had our problems, but at least when I was married to him, I belonged somewhere. Now, I belonged nowhere. Elizabeth was working retail part-time, complaining about being too old for customer service, but having no other options. Carter was living his best life in his downtown condo, and I was stuck in limbo, neither moving forward nor able to go back. A year later, Caroline told me that Elizabeth had finally apologized to Carter. Actually apologized, not just asked for money. She'd written him a letter acknowledging that she'd overstepped, that she'd had no right to interfere in his divorce, that she understood why he'd cut her off. Did he forgive her? I asked. He's talking to her again, but the money isn't coming back. He told her that ship sailed when she wrote that letter to his lawyer. And she's okay with that. She doesn't have a choice. She's just grateful he's willing to have a relationship with her at all. I thought about writing my own apology letter to Carter. Not because I wanted him back. That ship had sailed for both of us, but because I missed having a family. I missed Elizabeth's daily check-ins and Carter's steady presence, even if he'd been emotionally distant. But every time I started writing, I got angry again. Angry at Carter for being so rigid and unforgiving. Angry at Elizabeth for betraying me when I needed her most. Angry at Nate for using me and discarding me when I wasn't profitable anymore. The truth is, I still don't think I was entirely wrong. I was lonely in my marriage, and Carter was emotionally unavailable, but somewhere along the way, I'd stopped trying to fix our problems and started looking for an escape. I'd chosen Nate over working on my marriage, and when that blew up, I'd expected everyone else to clean up the mess. They didn't. Carter moved on. Elizabeth learned to live with less, and I learned that actions have consequences even when you don't think they should. I'm still living with my parents, still working retail, still single, still angry at everyone who didn't support me through the worst time of my life. But late at night, when I'm lying in my childhood bed staring at the ceiling, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices, if I'd talked to Carter about feeling lonely instead of finding comfort with Nate, if I'd fought for my marriage instead of fighting against it. But those thoughts don't last long, because the truth is Carter was never going to change, and Elizabeth was never going to choose me over her son, and Nate was never going to be anything more than a distraction. I just wish I'd figured that out before I lost everything trying to get something better.